What's up, party people? My name is Sunny Ray. This is the Sunny Ray Show. Welcome back. Today, I've got a really interesting gentleman. He'll be joining me as a guest. His name is Derek. Derek Wilder is. He wrote the book called "The Butterfly in the Boardroom," which is the title of this talk as well. Derek is the CEO and founder of Hallmark Homes, Indiana's top on your lot custom home builder, where he has combined his accounting and theological background to manage business as a chaotic system rather than a machine. He's got a very counterintuitive approach to business, and he's now transitioning into a new role as an author and guide, sharing insights from his manuscript, The Butterfly in the Boardroom, which details 5 key habits for leaders to navigate uncertainty and grow their business. So I'm going to bring on Derek. How you doing, Derek?
Good to see you, Sonny.
Yeah, nice to be with you as well. So Derek, what are you building at Hallmark Homes? Maybe, or I guess let's talk more about what you're building now. Like, what's the tell us a little bit about what you're most passionate about. Is it Butterfly in the Boardroom? Where do we begin?
Yeah, well, they do go hand in hand. I sold the company about 4 years ago. I'm still on board for I have a 5-year contract as the CEO with this company, but it's been a real significant passion of mine over the last couple of years. We've got a lot of young executives we're grooming to take over this 30-year-old business into the next few decades, and just thinking about things like culture, how we got to where we are, how we can continue to keep this going. And I was really having a very hard time even finding words for it, because a lot of the stuff that we've kind of done over this last 30 years to be in a really traditional brick and mortar, not only metaphorical, but actual business. We've done things that didn't really line up with a lot of the business books that I read in the 90s, 2000s, and 2010s. And I wanted to get that like infiltrated into our organization.
That makes a lot of sense. And we're going to get into that, I guess, later on in the interview. So, Derek, as I was saying, I love to, kind of chart people's hero's arc and go back a little bit and ask people about, like how they got here. And I guess just to get a deeper understanding of why they're doing what they're doing as well, right? So you've led Hallmark Homes for more than 30 years since starting it in 1992. What pulled you into home building in the first place, coming from, a background as a CPA?
Yeah, this is fascinating. I did get an accounting degree. I am a CPA. I worked for Deloitte, which is a big consulting firm, for several years. However, one of the things that maybe I'll say luckily I got right, which even now today, many startups and businesses, I think, completely get upside down. And that is, I was out on the golf course with a friend of mine in my early 20s. And he was a little older than I was, and he was in the real estate business. And he was explaining that he was selling homes for a home builder, but that home builder, although it was a good price, it was a competitive price, that home builder would not let the customer change like anything. And if the customer wanted to find a builder that would allow a highly customized house, it would be a whole lot more expensive. So in my mind, with the technology that was coming around in the 90s, I had read a book by John Nesbitt called Megatrends, very old book now. And he was talking about how we were going from mass production to mass customization because of the technology that was coming on board. And so, believe it or not, in 1990, when I was in college, for instance, Excel didn't even exist. Right. And so if you think about us trying to create technology around being able to build a house that we can customize for a price that is comparable to a production house, because technology allows us to do that. That was the big idea at the time. But really bigger than that, okay, is the idea behind that, which is we listened to a customer before we thought about a product. The customer was saying, we'll spend more. We don't want to spend twice as much, but we want to put this wall over here. We want to add this outlet over here. And builders won't let you do that. It's kind of an all or nothing thing. And we heard that in the marketplace because, to be honest with you, I have very little interest in building homes. I can't frame a house. You don't want me up on a roof. I simply am a business guy. And, even many of the startups today, they come out with a product, but they haven't thought about the customer. And so then they're trying to figure out how to get the customer to like their product. From our perspective, we never thought about the product. We only thought about what's the customer want. I remember quite a few years ago, my mom, she wanted to start a coffee shop in a little town in Wisconsin. And she wanted to start like a higher end coffee shop, like a Starbucks kind of coffee shop. And this was, 10, 20 years ago. And, but the fact of the matter is, nobody wanted to pay $8 for a cup of coffee in this little tiny town of Birchwood, Wisconsin that had 400 people in it. But of course, after she went out of business, because she had a product and no customers, the pizza place comes into town 6 months later, and it's still thriving 20 years later because everybody wants pizza in Birchwood, Wisconsin, but they don't want an $8 cup of coffee. And so it's the same thing. And over again, I see businesses, and I like to call it the butterfly effect, which is this initial condition, the thing we're thinking about initially as we're moving into either creating, starting, or developing a business. We often just get it upside down. We get it backwards. At Deloitte, I worked on banking clients, insurance clients, manufacturing. I mean, I had some construction, but I was built to run businesses. I wasn't built to create, and I frankly didn't care if it was going to be a building business or not. What I was most interested in, is there a market? Do people want this? And so that's how we started and kind of how it took off. And believe it or not, you can say, oh, and so you were quickly successful. Well, yeah, but like, why wouldn't we be? We're giving the customers what they're asking that they want. I mean, why wouldn't they buy? I mean, you get automatic sales when the customer says, I want X, and you say, I'll give you X. What we try to do is we try to build Z and then try to get the guy that wants X to like Z. And we call it marketing. So that gives you kind of an idea about how we've thought about business really all along.
Derek, you trained as an accountant and then later studied theology, earning an MTS and an MDiv. How did that mix of disciplines and end up shaping the way you run a construction company?
Excuse me. In my mind, they're very deeply connected. As I started building Hallmark, and then the team grew and we started building Hallmark, we did become more and more successful. We got more and more busy. It got more and more stressful, more and more challenges. And by the time I was in my late 20s, I was having to face my own reality of who am I? Why am I struggling so much with this anxiety? And the anxiety that I was struggling with was coming from a belief that I had that my performance as an owner, my performance as a guy that's running a business that's growing, successful business, my performance equals my self-worth or my value. And so when the business would go bad, I would go into an anxiety attack. When the business would go good, I would feel great. And so the intersection between that and theology is simply this. And this is really what my dissertation was about, in simple terms. And that is, my value comes from something that's much bigger than myself, much bigger than a business, much bigger than my performance. In fact, when my performance and other people's opinions create my value, I am really just buying into a lie that's going to do nothing but put me into a panic attack. And so that's kind of the intersection between the two for me.
Got it. Super interesting. Uh, Hallmark Home calls itself an on your lot custom builder, right? So what does that model actually mean day to day, and why did you build the business around it instead of, the more common kind of subdivision model?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one that the answer is going to also, in my opinion, inform the way all entrepreneurs need to think deeply about growing a business, which is, on the one hand, we've got to find what is it that the customer wants. Um, and clearly, customers love the idea in Indiana of building a home that's customized on a couple of acres out in the country. I mean, that's kind of who we are here in Indiana. Okay. Now, you're never going to get that in Manhattan, New York, right? But in Indiana, they love this idea. Okay. So that's where we started, number one, because of the market. But the second thing is when you go in as a builder and you commit to millions of dollars to a piece of ground, that's not zoned, a piece of ground that needs to be developed, a piece of ground that could have problems once you unearth that ground. When you're first starting a business, you don't have a massive amount of capital to put at risk. And many of the builders that went out of business in 2008 were competitors with me, but they had such big risk in land positions that they went out of business. Some of the biggest builders in Indiana, like Davis Homes, went bankrupt. Now, you may not know these guys because they're regional builders. They're not national builders like Lennar and Pulte. But CP Morgan was the biggest builder in Indiana at the time, building like almost 2,000 homes a year. Charlie Morgan was. He's unfortunately passed away since then. But the whole company went out of business because of this risk they were taking. Now, we have been purchased by a big developer with significant capital, with hundreds and hundreds, almost 1,000 acres of ground in one of the fastest growing areas of the state. And so we're taking on more risk now as we've become more a mature company. But taking on the kind of risk where you're betting on these big land developments early on in a company, I mean, these are risks that are too risky for a small business to take on. And I use this language of a portfolio of small bets. It's critically important that small businesses continue to innovate with a portfolio of small bets rather than bet the farm on one big thing, hope it works, and then wonder why you went out of business a year later.
That's interesting. And what did the earliest years of the company look like before you had a kind of a repeatable process for selling and building in place?
Um, it probably looked like the chaos that you would expect a small business trying to find itself. It's probably what it looked like, a lot of chaos. Remember, this was back when the only option you had to track costs was Lotus 123, which you probably are too young to even remember that even existed, right? And so, let alone being able to use, it's like, so how did you do, did you have like a no code or low code software you were tracking things, or what was your CRM? Like, there was no internet, dude. Like, there is no CRM in 1992, right? And so we had to build our systems by hand. We had to build them manually. And then over the decades, we just morphed all of those systems into digital systems. Of course, now everything's in the cloud. Everything is completely automated. But back then, we had to manually systemize everything.
And what did riding out multiple market cycles teach you about, growing a business that like a steadier industry never, would have?
Yeah, several things. One is one of the things we talk about a lot in the Butterfly book is shorter planning horizons. I mean, in 2005, for example, in the 5-county area around Indianapolis, there were 15,000 homes built. Okay. Now, so that would be Marion County, where Indianapolis is, and then the contiguous counties, approximately 15,000 homes built in 2005. Imagine sitting in a boardroom with a big company and saying to yourself, hey, we're going to build 500 homes this year. It's 2005. The entire market's 15,000. And our 5-year plan is we're going to move ourselves up from 500 to 1,000 over the next 5 years, or 800 over the next 5 years. Well, keep in mind, 2005, there were 15,000 homes built in that area. In 2008, there were 3,000 homes built. 3,000.
Wow.
Okay. So here's the thing. I happen to believe that 5-year plans are delusional. Okay. I happen to believe that it's crazy to think that we can somehow predict 5 years from. And here's the challenge, Sonny. The challenge is when you plan to spend enough money in 5 years to maintain a volume, and you don't shut that spending down when the market shifts, you are going to go out of business. You will go bankrupt. Okay? And so one of the things that these market shifts has taught me is business is way more like weather than it is a machine. And think about technology. My word, talk about weather. It's more like weather. It's like, okay, today's a storm and tomorrow's a sunny day, but the next day AI just created another storm. Okay. The cloud comes along, creates another storm. The internet came along, created another storm. Okay. Nobody in any space, including technology, certainly in real estate, can say, oh, I think this internet thing is just going to stair step up naturally at about a 5 to 6% increase of growth per year. I mean, that's just delusional. Okay. And so what it's allowed us to do is understand philosophically that business looks more like weather. It's more chaotic than any of the business books say that it is. Okay. The second thing is we're always thinking about things like shorter planning horizons, 90-day plans rather than 5-year plans. That doesn't mean you have to throw away your big picture vision of your company. That doesn't mean that affordable custom homes on your lot needs to be scrapped. But it does mean that you have to really seriously think deeply if you're going to try to predict 5 years from now. Another thing that's important to us are what we call reversible moves. When we make a move into a market, we ask ourselves, when we make a move in a shift in a product line, we ask ourselves, how quickly can we reverse it if we're wrong? Like, are we betting the farm, or do we have something we can reverse? Well, when you go through the kind of market shifts that we've been through over the last 20 or 30 years, again, in brick and mortar businesses and in technology businesses, you start to realize, hey, it's possible the direction you're heading may need to shift very quickly because things might change in 30 days. Okay. And you weren't expecting to see it. Anyways, does that help? Does that kind of answer your question, Sonny?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And when did you first notice that the standard playbook, set a goal, build a plan, execute, wasn't matching what actually happened on the ground?
Yeah, one of the initial things I did as a young, naive business owner was I read what almost every business, person that starts with one employee read, which is The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. It's a very old book, but it's about systemizing everything. But then what I realized is after I thought that would be the panacea. I remember reading that book, like I was very young, but I remember staying up at night going, this is the answer. Like, this is going to solve everything. I've got the solution. I'm just going to systemize everything. I'm a CPA, for God's sakes. I mean, I ought to be able to systemize everything, right? And so I started implementing the systems, and then I realized a few years later, no, this business, okay, you have to have those systems in place. But a couple years into it, I realized, wait a second, people are more like the weather than machines. Markets are more like the weather than machines. Sometimes it's storming, sometimes it's sunny. It shifts quickly under your feet. So the systems to build a business are prerequisites. But it became pretty clear within a couple years of me thinking that building great systems was going to solve everything, that business really isn't set up like a machine, and neither are people. Okay, neither are people.
And was there like a, I guess before we switch gears, like a specific project, deal, or season at Hallmark that first cracked open your thinking about chaos theory as a lens for business?
I don't really think that there was one specific thing that happened. It was the ebbs and flows of a market, the ebbs and flows of challenges and difficulties that we faced, that finally I kept fighting. Like there's this internal fight that I think that many business owners, founders, leaders, managers have, where they're like, if I can just get that right, then okay, all right, so I got that right. Now this is messed up, but if I can just get that right, and then there's all these, but it never ends. Okay. It's like I can never quite get it right. And I just recognize that that's because you're never going to get it right. Like it's never going to be like you don't have as much control as what you think you do, which is really the premise of chaos theory. You might think you can control the weather, but you can't control the weather. Like the only thing you can do is control the steering wheel on the boat that's on the ocean that's in the storm. But like that's all you got. You cannot control the weather. And in light of that, well, and when once you lean into that as a founder, business owner, leader, when you realize I don't have as much control as what I thought, you stop holding yourself to an really a standard that's absolutely impossible according to the books. Oh, if you do X and Y and Z, it's all going to be okay. That's a standard that, again, is, in my opinion, just kind of delusional.
So you've written that doing everything right does not entitle you to kind of like a predictable outcome, right? So can you walk us through the moment that belief actually clicked for you, like not just as theory, but as something you lived through?
This, I'll call it philosophy of chaos theory, is something that I've applied to business, but I think becomes very real in everyone's life during very challenging circumstances. The story that I start with in the Butterfly book is a story about my father who was helping my mom through a very difficult time when they could not stop her from vomiting as she's fighting pancreatic cancer and she's been in the hospital 100 out of the last 150 days. And we have this question, like, what did we deserve? What did we do to deserve this? Why is this bad thing happening to us? And even in those moments, we have to kind of deeply ask ourselves, do we really think we have control over our lives like we are told by some of the books that we do? Or is it possible that life doesn't go in a linear straight line? Is it possible that sometimes bad things happen to good people? Is it possible that sometimes bad people get by with shit that they shouldn't get by with? Is it possible that we can eat healthy and work out and still die of a heart attack at age 45? Like those kind of inform a much bigger world view that really we all have faced, either with a loved one, and if we haven't, we're going to face, right? We're all going to face these existential questions. And all I'm doing is saying, hey, these concepts apply to business.
So you have like, I guess, what's an example of a small decision at Hallmark Homes that had kind of like an outsized effect, good or bad, completely out of proportion to how much thought went into it?
I will give you two examples, but I'll give you a good one and a bad
Please.
one. Okay. I'll start with the bad one, and then we'll get to the good one and leave us on a good note. Okay. So, my business now partner, who's now the president of Hallmark, excuse me, Scott, he, and there's no problem telling this story because, we're all very open about this, but he hired a sales manager that had an amazing, we'll say, pedigree. like amazing resume. But this person, their background had an unbelievable success in sales. But we did not, when we were in the process of hiring, we did not take into consideration the cultural change or the cultural difference between this person's resume and who we were. And interestingly, even within the first couple of weeks of this person being on board, I started getting calls from other employees saying, "What, this person isn't like us. Like, this is different. I'm not sure this is going to work, Derek." And we had one of our first big subdivisions that we developed. We ended up only selling like 5 houses in 6 months, which is a devastatingly poor result. Okay. But it was all because of this initial decision to hire a very high performer that didn't fit our culture and our understanding of how our product works and our customer. Okay. Now, once we made the shifts, that particular subdivision, I believe we've already sold 5 homes this month in that subdivision. Okay. It's been an amazing success once we turned it around. But that initial condition, that initial decision cost us 6 months in that subdivision and really, really hurt us. And all it was a decision to hire a very high performer without taking into consideration the cultural difference between that person and our company. Okay. It seemed good on paper. It looked like the right thing to do. And yet that little tiny decision had a way outsized consequence on the negative side of things. On the other hand, we didn't know about this asset class called build to rent. This was something new to us. It's where a builder goes into a subdivision and builds like 200 houses, but they're all rented. You don't sell any of them. It's almost like detached apartments. They're small, maybe 1,000, 1,200, 1,300 square foot, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, whatever. But you go in and you build them. Well, Scott, the same Scott, by the way, had been on a golf course, just happened to be on a golf course with a friend playing golf, asked the guy what he did. He'd never really met the guy before. He's talking about a project that's coming up that they're having trouble getting financed because they can't get the prices where they need for this subdivision. And he said, "Would you mind talking to Derek about this?" So this was several years ago, but I went and met with him. I was able to bid the project in a way that made the project work. And we built 200 homes. I mean, it was a $32 million sale that came from one guy on a golf course asking another guy, what are they up to? Okay. In my opinion, that is a small initial condition with an outsized consequence. Okay. Who would have known that morning? Right. And then think about it. Think about Scott waking up that Tuesday morning and saying this, "Honey," like his wife saying, "Honey, what's your 5-year plan?" "I don't know." "Well, what's your 1-day plan?" "Well, my 1-day plan is I'm going to go to a golf course. I'm going to talk to a guy I've never met before. And then I'm going to introduce Derek to this guy. And we're going to sign a $32 million deal off this golf course discussion." Like, that's my plan for the day. Let's get that in our plan and make sure we document it for the board of directors. I mean, again, delusional.
Go on. So that's fascinating. You're moving from being kind of the operator to being an author and guide, right? So what was the actual turning point that told you, it was time to start kind of sharing this thinking outward instead of just, running the company with it?
Well, here's the thing. No different than my pizza story and no different than my story about changing homes in the 1990s for customers. What I know is that every manager or leader that has 3, 4, 5 people, up to 500 people reporting to them, desperately want what we're working on. And here's why I know it. I know it because we need it. If you talk to my executives, here's what they're saying. I need a team that can solve problems based on who we are without bringing every problem to me. And now I'm not talking about, now there's wonderful founders out there that are, it's just them. And that's great. I'm talking about leaders, managers, and founders who have 5 people, 5-person team, 10-person team, 50, 100, 500-person team. This is the thing that's filling up their calendar. So they can't work on the business. They have to stay in the business working on it because they're constantly solving the problems that it seems like nobody else can solve. And so this is the thing that we desperately need. And so, frankly, I've just been talking to, I simply had a little coffee with a guy this morning. His name's Don. He runs, I believe, the largest franchise home builder in the United States. When I met with him today, I said, the thing that I'm really focused on is how we can help teams solve problems without everything coming to the leader or manager. And he's just like, oh my gosh, that is exactly what we need. Okay. You can't talk to somebody that's got a team of any size that is not needing this. And how do I know that? 1, I've asked and asked and asked, but 2, we need it. We desperately need, this is the thing we're solving. And we know if we're solving it, there's plenty of other companies needing the same thing. So this has been kind of my passion and what I've been focusing on for Hallmark, but also have been helping other people with as well.
Really interesting. So you mentioned exploring practical AI tools, right, for owners and leaders, and that you've already built some to help develop leaders. So what problems more specifically are those tools actually solving? You know, that a book or maybe, I don't know, like a workshop can't solve.
Yeah. So what these AI tools allow you to do is go in and put a very specific problem that you're facing into them. And then it feeds back to you the concepts from the butterfly book. So you understand how to make shorter planning horizons, create a feedback loop, set up a solution that has a reversible move to it, create a modular team with backup plans, allow portfolios of small bets to occur without betting the farm. All these things that leaders and managers and founders are using to make the next business decision. These are all things going through leaders' minds when they're trying to make a decision. And what it does is it puts it in the hands of the 52nd employee. Okay. So even if it's something, for example, I'll just give you an example of one we did a couple days ago. We had one of our labor recruiters. He wanted to hire a mason, which was fine, but the mason's mixer, which is about a $3,000 or $4,000 piece of machine, just 2 days before had gotten stolen. So he didn't have a mixer. So my labor guy says, I want to buy the guy a mixer so he'll come on board and work for us. Okay. This is a guy that's an employee, okay, that works with us. He's trying to solve a problem. That problem is probably going to have to go to somebody else, figure out, all right, can we do this? And we're going to argue about it and this sort of thing. But by going to the Butterfly Boardroom app, going to the Coach Me, putting in the scenario, now we have language to deal with. Because what if that guy that works for me comes back and says, look, I want to help this guy out, but here's what I don't want to do. I don't want to set up a bad initial condition. What do I mean by that? I don't want to set up a scenario where I'm buying equipment for these subcontractors, because if I buy it for him, the next subcontractor that comes up, well, why don't you buy me a mixer? Well, why don't you buy me a saw? Well, why don't you buy me a truck? See, when you set up the initial conditions wrong, you create all kinds of cultural problems throughout the organization. Okay. So this feedback you're going to get from the Coach Me is going to say things like that. Wait, what's the initial condition? What's the risk that you're taking here? Can we create some sort of reversible move? In other words, can we rent a mixer for the guy for a few weeks until he gets his feet on the ground and he can get his own? Can we solve the problem that way? Okay. Those are the kind of solutions an AI tool with this information can suggest rather than an employee going out, making a decision that would never match the kind of culture of problem solving that the executive team would be thinking about. So it's putting into the hands of employees ways to solve problems like the executive team would be thinking about. Not only does it help that person solve the problem, but it also helps the leader get on the same page with that person, decreases conflict, decreases argument. These are the kind of problem solving things that we're working on to be able to help leaders and managers and founders.
If a business owner reads only, one of your 5 habits and applies it this week, which one would move the needle fastest and why?
Yeah, probably the first one is going to be you've got to set the initial conditions correctly. Whether it's the initial condition with a customer signing a contract, with a subcontractor knowing exactly what the scope of work is, whether it's an employee knowing exactly what he or she should be doing on a given day, whether it's how we should set up the system to handle conflict. All these things trickle down in a million different ways. And then, unfortunately, if they're not set up initially correctly, they become bad habits that permeate all 100 employees, all 200 suppliers. And then all of a sudden, we've got a mess on our hands. And now we're a turnaround. We're not a growing business.
And so, Derek, content and audience building seems like are clearly part of this next chapter for you. So, what have you learned so far about getting a framework in front of the right owners versus just publishing it and hoping?
Yeah, it's a great question. And really, here's what I've learned. And what I've learned so far hasn't been because of the digital space. What I've learned so far has come from all the people trying to sell to me. The 15 cold call emails I get every day, the 50 that go into my spam box, the crazy cold call DMs that I get on LinkedIn. Okay. Here's what I've learned. How about you care about somebody? Like, how about you ask how someone's doing? How about you check in and try to actually get to know someone? This has been part of Hallmark for 30 years now. And I encourage my salespeople and I encourage my construction managers, for instance, to just ask a simple question. Do you really care about that customer? Or are you just trying to get the house built? Do you care about the customer? Or are you just trying to get another sale? Do you actually care about the customer? Or are you just reaching out to hit a quota? I believe that over the next 10 years, this whole digital marketing schema is going to fizzle like a firework fizzling out in the air. Because people are going to get immune to all of the I don't care about you attacks from email, text messages, phone calls, LinkedIn hits. Okay. And so here's the thing. If I have to grow this company, if I have to grow this vision of the Butterfly Book, if I have to grow this vision of helping leaders solve problems like we need, and I have to do it by not caring about people, I'm not going to do it. And if I only impact 10 people for my next 20 years of life, if I live an average lifespan, if I only impact 10 people out of this content, but I cared about them, I still think I win.
I like that, Derek. So I guess just a couple more for you, man. Looking, I guess, at the home building industry specifically, where do you see it heading over the next 5 years? And does your, chaos system thinking change how you'd advise someone building a company in it today?
Yeah, well, first of all, here's what I know for sure, and that is the idea of understanding a business as a chaotic weather pattern rather than a machine is going to be more and more relevant over the next 5 years, which basically is saying this, that paradoxically, we don't know what's going to happen over the next 5 years. We have no way to predict it, which, in my opinion, solidifies the fact that a chaotic weather pattern is going to be the route that this business environment is going to take. Certainly, AI is going to be have a massive impact on the building industry. I think it's going to first have a massive impact on sales and marketing before it ever impacts the electrician. But eventually we'll have cool things, right? We'll have glasses, we'll have like goggles. The electrician will go out. He'll be able to put the goggles on and see exactly where the electrical outlets need to go without looking at the plan. I mean, there's going to be all kinds of cool stuff that come out of technology for builders. Maybe eventually we'll be able to print a house in 32 hours. I don't know. But that seems to be a long ways off. But there's going to be a lot of things in between now and that happening that is going to make a major impact for builders. And, ultimately it will be, we're a slower moving industry, right? We're not tech, we're not on the edge of like the next great, it takes a minute for some of these industries like home building to like grab on to the next thing, right? We might call ourselves as an industry a little bit of a laggard, but the best businesses, the best builders are immediately deploying AI, just like they immediately deployed the internet, deployed the cloud, deployed SAP and Oracle or whatever systems they are, CRMs in different ways. So.
I love it. So Derek, I guess if someone reading your book decides to actually run their business on these 5 habits, what's the first thing that breaks or, gets uncomfortable before it gets better?
Well, I think if somebody reads this book, the irony is they already know what's broken. Every leader that's willing to look in the mirror and be honest with themselves already has the 10 broken things. The goal with the butterfly in the boardroom is to help leaders have a different perspective on how business works. To 1, give themselves a little grace, and 2, make appropriate bets, appropriate risks based on the market conditions with where they are, and being able to be agile in a market condition rather than trying to force feed some sort of standard business operating procedure into a system of weather that ultimately, unfortunately, causes approximately 90% of the small businesses to go out of business.
Awesome. Derek, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. Where do people learn more about the book, also yourself and the company?
Yeah. I mean, the easiest way about the book is butterflyboardroom.com. It's very simple. Of course, the book is on Amazon, that sort of thing. The app, the AI work we're doing, it's all free, butterflyboardroom.app. And of course, Hallmark Homes is hallmarkhomes.com. So.
Love it. Thank you so much, Derek. Hang out for 1 minute. I'm going to bring the stream to an end. Thank you all who are listening live. And I guess everyone else that checks in the future. Until next time. Cheers.